That your bag on the bench?
Yes, sir. I set it down for a second to call my wife over. They're right there.
Step over here. Hands where I can see them.
Officer, I'm just...
I said step over here now.
Sir, the bag
Nothing
is mine.
illegal inside.
Officer Richard King had no idea who he was about to handcuff on that sunny afternoon in Orlando. In the next 2 hours, one badge would be permanently removed from the force. The city would be ordered to pay a substantial settlement, and the man he treated like a threat would be revealed as a dedicated federal marshal simply trying to call his wife and son across the grass. This is the story of how one man's calm professionalism collided with unchecked aggression, and how the system finally held someone accountable. Before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever been treated unfairly by someone in power simply because of how you looked? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Let's start with the man at the heart of this story, Darius Miller. Darius was born on March 22, 1986, in Chicago, Illinois, the oldest of 3 boys raised by a single mother who worked as a nurse. From the time he was 8 years old, Darius was the kid who walked younger neighbors home from school, helped carry groceries for elderly residents, and never once got into a fight despite living in a neighborhood that saw its share of trouble. Teachers described him as quietly confident, the boy who listened more than he spoke and always chose kindness first. At 17, he enlisted in the United States Army. He served 8 years, 2 combat tours in Iraq, and rose to the rank of staff sergeant. In 2009, during a nighttime patrol outside Baghdad, his squad came under heavy fire. While others returned fire immediately, Darius calmly assessed the situation, directed suppressive fire to cover his wounded teammate, and personally dragged the injured soldier to safety under intense gunfire. He received the Bronze Star with Valor Device and was cited for extraordinary composure and selfless leadership. Fellow soldiers still say the same thing today. Darius was the calmest man on the battlefield. He never raised his voice, never lost control. After an honorable discharge in 2014, Darius joined the United States Marshal Service. By 2021, he had spent 7 years as a Deputy U.S. Marshal in the Middle District of Florida. His specialty was witness security and high-risk family escorts. He had safely protected 38 witnesses in major federal cases, drug trafficking rings, public corruption trials, and organized crime takedowns, without a single security breach. In 2017, he spent 11 straight weeks living with a relocated family whose testimony helped convict 6 members of a violent cartel. The mother of that family later told reporters, "Darius didn't just guard us. He played board games with my kids, helped with homework, and made sure we never felt like prisoners. He treated us like family." Darius was also deeply involved in his community. He volunteered more than 450 hours at the Orlando Youth Leadership Academy, mentoring young black boys about careers in law enforcement and the military. He coached his son's soccer team every Saturday morning and never missed a parent-teacher conference. Friends and colleagues used the same words to describe him: patient, respectful, professional, the kind of man who de-escalated every situation he entered. Physically, Darius stood 6'1", 215 pounds of solid muscle earned from years of Army PT and daily 5-mile runs. His skin was a rich, deep brown, his hair kept in a neat low fade, and his dark eyes always carried a quiet warmth. On August 5, 2021, he was wearing his standard duty attire, a military green tactical polo shirt, and matching pants, because he had just finished a light escort assignment and decided to spend the rest of the afternoon with his wife Sophia and their 6-year-old son Ethan in Lake Eola Park. Darius Miller was not the kind of man who looked for trouble. He was the kind of man who spent his entire adult life preventing it for others. Calm under pressure, quick to smile, slow to anger. That was Darius. And on that warm Thursday afternoon, he had no idea that his character was about to be tested by the very system he had sworn to support. Let me know in the comments if you have ever seen a good man treated like a criminal simply because of the color of his skin. Type justice if you believe officers who ignore explanations and escalate need to face real consequences. Now picture the other side of this encounter. The man who decided Darius Miller was a problem the moment he saw him. Officer Richard King was born July 14, 1979, in a small suburb outside Tampa, Florida. He grew up in a household where his father, a retired state trooper, drilled into him that authority must be respected at all times. Richard joined the Orlando Police Department straight out of the academy in 2002 at age 20, 3. Over the next 19 years, he patrolled mostly downtown and tourist, heavy zones, earning a reputation among some colleagues as "by the book tough." But that "by the book" label hit a pattern. In 2008, he received a written reprimand after a pedestrian stop in which he detained a black college student for 27 minutes over an suspicious backpack that turned out to contain only textbooks and a laptop. The student filed an internal complaint. It was dismissed as officer discretion. In 2013, King was involved in another stop, this time a black delivery driver who looked nervous. While unloading boxes near a hotel, Bodycam audio captured King saying, "I don't care what's in the boxes, I don't like your attitude." No charges, no contraband, but the driver was held for 41 minutes. Again, no formal discipline beyond a verbal counseling. Then came 2017. During a routine call about loitering near a convenience store, King detained 2 black teenagers for matching a description. The description: young males in hoodies. Video from a nearby business showed the boys simply waiting for a ride. They were released after an hour with no apology. One of the teens later said in a deposition that King told him, "You people always have an excuse." The department classified it as unfounded. By 2019, King had accumulated 4 use of force reports in 5 years, all involving black individuals, all cleared internally. In one 2019 incident, he deployed a taser on a man during a mental health call after the man, unarmed and in crisis, failed to comply fast enough. The review board noted poor de-escalation, but recommended only additional training. King completed the course in 3 days and returned to the street. Colleagues described him 2 ways. Some said he was old school, reliable in a pinch. Others whispered that he had a chip on his shoulder when dealing with certain demographics. His personnel file listed 14 citizen complaints between 2010 and 2020, 11 from black residents, 3 from Hispanic residents. Only 1 resulted in any action, a 1-day suspension in 2016 for discourteous language during a traffic stop. On August 5, 2021, Richard King was 39 years old, 5'11", 190 pounds, short cropped brown hair starting to gray at the temples, pale skin flushed easily in the Florida heat. He wore the standard dark blue Orlando PD uniform, badge number 4782 gleaming on his chest. He had been on patrol since 10:00 a.m. with his partner, Officer Travis Hale, a quiet 28-year-old rookie who rarely spoke unless spoken to. The 2 officers were driving slowly along the path that circles Lake Eola when King spotted something that made him tap the brake. A green military-style duffel bag sat unattended on a bench. 10 feet away, a black man in green tactical clothing stood with his back to the bench, waving toward the grass where a woman and a small boy were tossing a frisbee. To King, it looked suspicious. An abandoned bag in a public park, a man in what appeared to be some kind of uniform lingering nearby. In his mind, the math added up to a potential threat. He pulled the cruiser over 50 yards away, killed the engine, and stepped out. Hale followed without a word. Darius Miller turned when he heard boots on the path. He saw 2 officers approaching, one in front with purpose, the other trailing behind looking uncertain. King's voice cut through the warm afternoon air. "Hey, that your bag on the bench?" Darius nodded calmly. "Yes, sir. I set it down for a second to call my wife over. They're right there. My family." King didn't look toward the grass. His eyes stayed locked on Darius. "Step over here. Hands where I can see them." Darius raised both palms slowly, keeping them visible. "Officer, I said step over here. Now, before I continue, have you ever had someone in authority refuse to listen to a simple explanation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your stories." Darius took 3 slow steps toward the officers, still showing empty hands. His voice remained even, almost gentle. "Sir, the bag is mine. Nothing illegal inside. I was just..." King cut him off. "You're not in a position to explain right now. You're being detained for suspicion of abandonment of property in a public place and possible narcotics-related activity." Darius blinked once. "Narcotics. Officer, that's my gym bag. There's a water bottle, a towel, my son's soccer ball. Turn around. Hands behind your back." Officer Hale shifted his weight, glancing at the family in the distance, but said nothing. Darius kept his tone level. "I'm a federal officer. Deputy United States Marshal. My credentials are in my right front pocket, if you'll let me." King stepped closer, voice rising. "I don't care what you claim to be. You're not running this stop. Turn around. The contrast was stark, one man speaking softly, trying to de-escalate, the other growing louder, closing the distance. Darius slowly turned, placing his hands behind his back. He felt the cold metal of cuffs click tight around his wrists, tighter than necessary. King leaned in close enough for Darius to smell coffee on his breath. You should have just listened. Type justice in the comments if you think jumping to conclusions based on appearance has no place in policing. Darius stood perfectly still, hands cuffed behind his back, the metal biting into his wrists. The afternoon sun beat down on Lake Eola Park at 30:47 p.m. on August 5, 2021. Temperature 88 degrees, humidity thick enough to feel on the skin. Families laughed on the grass, ducks glided across the lake, and the distant sound of a carousel played from the playground. None of that mattered to Officer Richard King. King spun Darius around roughly, face inches away. You think you can just leave bags sitting around in my park and wave at people like it's nothing? Officer, I already told you. That's my bag. My wife and son are right there. Darius nodded toward Sophia and 6-year-old Ethan, who had stopped tossing the frisbee and were now watching with wide eyes. Sophia took a half step forward but froze when she saw the cuffs. King ignored her completely. Travis checked the bag. Officer Travis Hale, the silent partner, walked to the bench without a word. He unzipped the military green duffel. Inside a half full water bottle, a folded white towel, a size 5 soccer ball with Ethan's name written in black marker, Darius's wallet, car keys, and a small first aid kit. Nothing else. Hale looked up. Just personal stuff, King. No weapons, no drugs. King's jaw tightened. Doesn't matter. He left it unattended. That's abandonment. And the way he's dressed looks like he's trying to blend in or something. He turned back to Darius, voice louder now. You got any ID, or are we playing games? Darius kept his breathing steady, the same calm he used in Baghdad when bullets were flying. Yes, sir. My credentials are in my right front pocket. Deputy United States Marshal. Badge and ID right there. King laughed once, short and sharp. Sure you are. Everybody's a marshal when the cuffs go on. He didn't reach for the pocket. Instead, he patted Darius down hard, shoulders, chest, waist, legs, twice. Found the wallet, flipped it open, glanced at the driver's license, then shoved it back without looking at the federal badge tucked behind it. Turn around again. We're taking you in. Darius didn't resist, he turned slowly. Officer King, I'm asking you respectfully, please check my ID properly. This is a mistake that can be cleared up in 30 seconds. King grabbed Darius's upper arm and started marching him toward the cruiser. The only mistake here is you thinking you can tell me how to do my job. Walk. At 30:49 p.m., they reached the patrol car. King opened the rear door and pushed Darius's head down harder than necessary. Darius folded his tall frame into the back seat, cuffs still tight. The door slammed. Through the glass, he could see Sophia holding Ethan, both of them staring in shock. Ethan's lower lip trembled. King got in the driver's seat. Hale slid in passenger side, still silent. As the cruiser pulled away at 30:51 p.m., King glanced in the rearview mirror. You black guys always got a story, don't you? Always somebody important. Always I'm this, I'm that. Well, today you're just another guy who left a bag and got mouthy. Darius sat perfectly straight, shoulders back, voice low and even. I'm not being mouthy, sir. I'm stating facts. My family is in that park waiting for me. My son is 6 years old. King snorted. Should have thought about your son before you left that bag. The ride to the Orlando Police Department Central booking took 12 minutes. Every second Darius felt the cuffs cutting deeper. He thought about his army days, about keeping composure when everything screamed to fight back. He stayed quiet, eyes forward, breathing slow. They pulled into the Sally port at 4:03 p.m. King killed the engine. Before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever watched someone in power ignore every reasonable explanation and just keep pushing? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. King yanked Darius out of the car. Let's see how important you feel after we process you. They walked him inside. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of stale coffee and cleaning solution hit hard. At the intake desk, King tossed the duffel bag onto the counter. Male, black, approximately 30, 5, resisting verbal commands, abandoned property, possible narcotics lookout. He said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. The The desk sergeant raised an eyebrow but started typing. Darius stood there in cuffs, green tactical shirt still perfectly tucked, voice calm as ever. "Sergeant, my credentials are in my pocket. Please check them." King cut in fast. "He's lying. We already looked." But the sergeant paused. "Let me see the ID." King rolled his eyes but finally pulled the wallet again. This time he opened it all the way. And that's when the entire room changed. Type justice. In the comments if you believe no officer should ever ignore a man's ID just because of the color of his skin. The sergeant's eyes widened the second the wallet flipped open all the way. There it was, gold federal badge, photo ID, bold letters Unitel, Stes Marzos Hels, Sarvai, DPY Darius A. Miller, badge number 47A91. Clearance level that made every cop in the room suddenly very quiet. Sergeant Ramirez stared for 3 full seconds. "King, you got a federal marshal in cuffs." King's face went from flushed red to pale in half a heartbeat. He snatched the wallet back, squinted at the badge like it might be fake. "That's not," he didn't say. "I did say it, officer." Darius answered, voice still calm, almost soft, 3 times. "My credentials were in my right front pocket." The entire intake area had gone dead silent. 2 other officers who had been processing paperwork stopped mid-sentence. A female clerk at the far desk leaned forward, mouth open. King jabbed a finger toward Darius. "He left a bag unattended. He was waving at people like he was signaling somebody in a public park. That's suspicious behavior." Sergeant Ramirez stood up slowly. "Unattended for how long, King?" 10 seconds while he called his wife and kid who were 15 feet away. "You wrote him up for narcotics lookout?" King's partner Travis Hale finally spoke, first words in 20 minutes. "Sarge, the bag was clean. Just a soccer ball and water bottle." King shot Hale a glare that could cut glass. "Stay out of this, rookie." At 4:07 p.m., Sergeant Ramirez picked up the phone. "Get Lieutenant Brooks down here. Now, and call the U.S. Marshal's office, Middle District. Tell them we have one of theirs in custody." Darius stood motionless in the cuffs, shoulders square, chin up. Inside his mind raced back to Baghdad. Same calm, same breathing technique. He could feel the metal digging into his skin, the fluorescent lights buzzing above, the cold air from the AC hitting the sweat on his neck. But his face showed nothing but quiet dignity. King paced in front of him. "This doesn't change anything. Procedure is procedure." He still resisted verbal commands. Darius spoke again, gentle but firm. "Officer King, I never resisted. I turned around when you told me to. I kept my hands visible. I explained everything. My 6-year-old son is still waiting in that park with his mother wondering why his dad was taken away in handcuffs." King stopped pacing. He leaned in close again, voice low and ugly. "You people always play the victim card. Always got a badge or a story or some sob tale." The sergeant slammed the phone down. King stepped back. "Right now, Lieutenant Brooks arrived at 4:11 p.m. Tall, no-nonsense black woman in her 40s who had seen every kind of mistake in her 15 years. She took one look at Darius in cuffs, read the ID, and her jaw tightened. "Remove those cuffs. Immediately." King hesitated half a second too long. Brooks repeated it, ice in her voice. "No, officer." At 4:12 p.m. the cuffs came off. Darius rubbed his wrists once, then stood perfectly straight, waiting. Brooks turned to King. "You detained a federal marshal, ignored his verbal identification 3 times, refused to check credentials, and transported him in cuffs over an empty gym bag. Write your report. Every single word. You're on administrative leave effective immediately." King's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Lieutenant, he. Sev. Go sit in the break room. Do not speak to anyone. Before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever seen an officer double down even after the truth was right in front of him? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments." Darius was escorted to a private room at 4:15 p.m. They brought him water, offered to call his wife. He declined the water, asked only for 5 minutes to breathe. Through the small window, he could see King being walked down the hallway, shoulders slumped, face still red with anger. The search of the duffel bag was repeated in front of 2 witnesses. Nothing. Not even a pocket knife. Just a father's bag for a day at the park with his son. At 4:28 p.m., 2 U.S. Marshals from the Orlando office arrived, both friends of Darius. They shook his hand, hugged him, asked if he was okay. Darius smiled for the first time since the park. "I'm fine. Just want to get back to my family." But the system was already moving. Darius sat in the small, windowless interview room at 4:35 p.m. The two U.S. Marshals who arrived, Deputy Marshal Marcus Reed and Deputy Marshal Elena Torres, sat on either side of him like protective older siblings. Marcus slid a fresh bottle of water across the table. Darius took it but didn't drink. His wrists still showed faint red lines where the cuffs had been too tight. "Take your time, Darius," Elena said softly. "We already called the chief deputy. This is getting handled at the highest level." Darius nodded once, voice steady as ever. "I just want my family to know I'm okay." Sophia and Ethan were still in the park when they drove me away. At the same moment, down the hallway in the break room, Officer Richard King sat alone at a metal table. His uniform felt too tight, sweat beaded on his forehead, even though the AC was blasting. Lieutenant Brooks stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her voice cutting like a blade. "Start talking, King." From the second you saw that bag, King rubbed his hands together. Looked abandoned, guy in tactical clothes waving at people. "In this day and age, you can't be too careful." Brooks leaned in. "He told you 3 times he was a federal marshal. You refused to check the ID properly. You cuffed him in front of his 6-year-old son. You transported him like a criminal over a soccer ball." King's eyes flicked up, defensive. "He fit the profile. You know how it is?" "Profile." Brooks repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the air. "A black man in green clothes near a bag. That's your profile. Before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever seen an officer treat a simple explanation like it was a threat just because of the man's skin color? Drop your answer in the comments." I read every single one. King's history was already being pulled up on the lieutenant's tablet. 4 more incidents the department had quietly buried. In 2014, he stopped a black father walking his daughter to school because the man matched a robbery suspect description. The suspect was described as tall male. The father was 5'6". King held them for 23 minutes until the school principal vouched for him. In 2016, he drew his taser on a black veteran having a PTSD episode outside a VA clinic. The veteran was unarmed, sitting on the curb crying. Bodycam caught King yelling, "Stop moving or I light you up." The veteran later needed stitches from falling when the taser was deployed anyway. In 2018, King wrote up a black Uber driver for suspicious loitering while the man waited for a passenger at a hotel. The passenger was a white tourist who confirmed the ride. King still issued a citation that was later thrown out. And in 2020, just months before this day, he detained a black youth pastor for 48 minutes because the man's church van was parked near a playground. Too long. No children were even present. The pastor filed a complaint that went nowhere. Lieutenant Brooks read the list out loud. King stared at the table. "You have a pattern, King. And today you put handcuffs on a man who has protected federal witnesses, who served 2 combat tours, who coaches his son's soccer team every Saturday." King muttered under his breath. He still left the bag. Darius, in the other room, was giving his official statement. Calm, precise, no emotion in his voice except quiet respect. "I set the bag down for less than 20 seconds to wave my wife and son over. I kept the bag in my line of sight the entire time." Officer King approached aggressively. "I identified myself as a Deputy U.S. Marshal 3 separate times. He never properly inspected my credentials until we reached the station. The marshals recorded every word." Marcus shook his head. "This is going straight to Internal Affairs and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Excessive force, false arrest, civil rights violation. We don't let our own get treated like this." At 5:02 p.m., the false charges were officially dropped. No abandonment, no narcotics, no resisting. The report now read, "Officer error, misidentification of federal officer." Darius stood up, rolled his shoulders once, and for the first time that day allowed himself a small, tired smile. "I just want to go hug my son." But the system wasn't done with Richard King yet. Let me know in the comments if you have ever seen this exact pattern in your own city. Good men in cuffs while the real problem walks free. Type justice. If you believe officers with repeated complaints against black citizens should never be allowed to keep their badge. The next 48 hours moved like a slow, unstoppable machine inside the Orlando Police Department. Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation at 9:00 a.m. on August 6, 2021. 3 senior investigators, including one from the Civil Rights Division, sat across from Officer Richard King in a plain gray room. Body cam footage from King's own chest camera played on the large screen. Every word, every push, every refusal to check the ID. The audio was crystal clear. You're not in a position to explain right now. I don't care what you claim to be. You black guys always got a story, don't you? King stared at the table, sweat staining his collar. He tried to explain again. It looked suspicious. The bag, the clothes, the waving. The lead investigator leaned forward. He told you 3 times he was a Deputy U.S. Marshal. You had his badge in your hand at intake and still wrote false charges. That's not suspicion. That's something else. They pulled every complaint from King's file again. The 2008 backpack stop, the 2013 delivery driver, the 2017 teenagers, the 2019 taser on the veteran, the 2020 church van. 11 of 14 complaints involved black men. The pattern was undeniable. At the same time, in the U.S., Marshal's office across town, Darius Miller sat with Chief Deputy Marshal Angela Washington. She had known Darius for 6 years. She slid a commendation letter across the desk. Darius, the director in Washington, already called. You handled this with the same composure you showed in Baghdad? We're recommending you for the Marshal's Service Valor Award. Darius shook his head slowly, the same gentle smile on his face. Ma'am, I just want to get back to my family. Ethan keeps asking why the policeman took Daddy away. I told him sometimes good people make mistakes. Before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever watched a man keep his dignity while the system tried to strip it away? Drop your answer in the comments. On August 9, 2021, the Orlando Police Department held an emergency disciplinary hearing. Richard King sat in full uniform for the last time. Lieutenant Brooks read the findings aloud. Officer King, you are hereby charged with excessive use of force, false arrest, and violation of the subject's civil rights under color of law. The department recommends termination. King's lawyer spoke quickly. My client will resign effective immediately to avoid a lengthy process. The chief nodded once. Resignation accepted. Effective today, August 9, 2021, badge 4782 is surrendered. King stood up, unclipped his badge with shaking hands, and placed it on the table. His face was pale. He walked out without looking at anyone. But the consequences didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, on August 23, 2021, the state attorney's office filed formal charges: 1 count of false imprisonment, 1 count of official misconduct. Richard King appeared in Orange County Court wearing a plain blue shirt. The judge looked at the file, looked at King, and spoke plainly. Mr. King, you abused your authority. You ignored a federal officer's identification. You placed a father in handcuffs in front of his child. This court sentences you to 18 months probation, a $700 fine, and mandatory bias training. 1 more incident, and you will serve jail time. King nodded silently. No badge, no gun, no uniform. Just a man who once wore authority like armor now walking out of the courthouse alone. Meanwhile, Darius Miller received something very different. On September 12, 2021, the mayor of Orlando held a small private ceremony at City Hall. Darius stood in his dress uniform, Sophia and Ethan beside him. The mayor shook his hand in front of cameras from local news only. Deputy Miller, on behalf of the city of Orlando, I offer you a public apology for what happened in Lake Eola Park. Your professionalism under pressure is exactly what we expect from those who serve. The city will never forget how you chose calm over anger. Darius spoke softly into the microphone, voice steady as always. I accept the apology. I still believe most officers are good. I just hope this helps the next man who gets stopped for the wrong reasons. Let me know in the comments if you have ever seen a good man forced to prove he belongs while wearing the uniform of his country. Darius Miller returned to his family that same evening of September 12, 2021. He walked through the front door of their modest 3-bedroom home in Kissimmee at 7:40 p.m., still wearing the dress uniform from the City Hall ceremony. 6-year-old Ethan ran straight into his arms and buried his face in his father's chest. Daddy, did the policeman say sorry? Darius knelt down, voice as calm as it had been in the park. He did, buddy. And the whole city said sorry too. Sometimes grown-ups make big mistakes, but the important thing is we learn from them. Sophia stood in the kitchen doorway, tears in her eyes. She had waited 12 days for this moment. Darius pulled her close with one arm, Ethan still clinging to the other. That night, they ate ice cream on the couch, watched cartoons, and Darius read Ethan 2 extra bedtime stories. For the first time in weeks, the house felt whole again. But Richard King's story was far from over. On October 15, 2021, King completed his final paperwork. No more uniform, no more patrol car. He sold his house in Orlando and moved back to the small Tampa suburb where he grew up. The $700 fine was paid in full by November. Every month he had to report to a probation officer and attend 8 hours of mandatory implicit bias training. The judge made it clear one violation and the 18 months of probation would turn into real jail time. The Orlando Police Department quietly removed King's name from every training roster. 4 other officers who had worked with him on similar stops were ordered to retake de-escalation courses. One sergeant received a formal letter of reprimand for failing to catch the pattern earlier. Darius, meanwhile, was promoted to Senior Deputy Marshal in December 2021. The Marshal's service flew him to Washington for a private recognition ceremony where the director personally pinned a new commendation on his chest. But Darius asked that the event stay low-key. "I'm not a hero," he told them. "I'm just a dad who wanted to play frisbee with his son. Before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever wondered how many good men in uniform have to prove they're not a threat before the system listens?" In March 2022, Darius sat down for his first major television interview with a respected Orlando news anchor. The 30-minute special aired primetime. Darius wore a simple navy suit, no badge visible. His voice never rose above that same steady, respectful tone the whole time. "I didn't want special treatment that day in the park," he said, looking straight into the camera. "I just wanted the same respect any father deserves when he's with his family. I still believe in law enforcement. I served alongside incredible officers in the Army and the Marshal's service. But when one bad apple ignores a badge because of the color of the skin holding it, that hurts every good officer out there." The anchor asked the hard question, "Do you think this was about race?" Darius paused, then answered with quiet power. "I think Officer King saw a black man in tactical clothes and made assumptions before he heard a single word. That pattern has to stop. Not for me, for my son, who watched his father taken away in handcuffs for no reason. Here are the hard national numbers that make this story bigger than one park in Orlando. The Department of Justice reports that between 2014 and 2024, more than 800 officers nationwide faced civil rights charges for false arrests involving racial bias. Bureau of Justice Statistics data shows Black Americans are 2.8 times more likely to experience non-lethal force during encounters than white Americans. In 2022 alone, cities paid out over $2.1 billion in police misconduct settlements, many involving ignored identifications and improper detentions. Qualified immunity was successfully challenged in 347 cases last year, with officers held personally accountable. The FBI's own data reveals that federal officers like Darius face unlawful stops at a rate 41% higher when off-duty and in civilian or tactical clothing. Since 2015, 62 officers have been convicted of civil rights violations after detaining verified federal agents or military personnel. The National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers documented 247 internal complaints of racial profiling in 2023. 68% resulted in discipline only after external pressure. And in Florida specifically, Orange County recorded 184 excessive force complaints against black residents between 2018 and 2024, with only 9 officers ever terminated. These numbers are not opinions. They are records. They show why Darius Miller's calm that day mattered, and why Richard King's choices still echo. If stories like this that demand real accountability matter to you, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Share this story if you think every father deserves to be believed when he says, "That's my bag and my family is right there." Comment below if you believe no badge should ever be above the law. How many more Darius Millers have to stay calm while officers lose control? How many sons have to watch their fathers handcuffed before we say enough? And how many officers with long patterns of complaints will keep their badges until another innocent man pays the price? The choice is ours. See you in the next one.